Hi everyone, it's Mr. Stewart here again with an assignment video for the dance part 2 assignment in Toon Boom Harmony Essentials. Okay, so I've got my reference loaded up here. I've got my pose test from last week, and now we're going to go through and break down the rest of the dance. Now with dance animation and reference in general, one of the things that I try to do is find a good balance between using the reference and also kind of ignoring the reference and just using my animation knowledge to try to keep it a little looser, a little more animated, a little freer, and not just feeling like it's completely rotoscoped. So it's always a tricky little balance. The best thing that I try to do is to understand each and every move. Like, I'm going to be looking at the feet, I'm going to be looking at the hips, and we're only going to be doing basically the feet and the hips. But at some points, those are going to be moving in different directions. Like the hips will be part of an up and down sequence, whereas the foot might be coming from the left side and kicking it out to the front. And so there's going to be a different set of spacing that might need to happen on the hips that it then is going to happen on the foot. I'm also going to want to get really good force and impact and energy in all of those different things. So we'll see how this goes. But let's get started. And all right, so I'm going to go back to the animation layer, go back to my green, and I've been working in pencil, so I'll stay working in the pencil. And I've got my first two pretty simple and easy keys, but I still kind of want to just take a look at the video. And so this is a simple anticipation, but you can see that by frame 5 there is going to be not too much movement. So frame 5 is going to favor frame 7 in here, or frame 6. And I might do this, kind of on frame 4. And let's just go in and delete those two. Turn on my, and make this a little smaller. So I'm going to really favor kind of that down position, and then fill the empty cells. At this point, I'd probably go back and just go ahead and do now, a lot of times I might, really go through and do everything down to ones. At this point, I feel like I'm going to leave some of these on twos, and if I want to go back and do ones, then I can do that. So now I'm going to look at frame 6 to frame 15. But I don't want to get caught up in ones just yet. I'm going to kind of take another pass at breaking down the entire action. So this is where breakdowns get in here, because I can see that on frame 11, those legs are still straight. So this is where I would probably go to next. But I would also say, okay, in the terms of the hips are pretty close to the top. So find frame 11 here. And go to frame, well, if I can get this to work. That's frame 11. There we go. Leave this out here. I want to make sure those feet stay as locked in as possible. And I want to feel the energy that's happening. And then I'll go back in and try to do these. So I would go back to frame 9, kind of look that back. And frame 9 is going to have, you know, some real push off still of those legs. And that's going to be important to try and get that sense of the push. So I'm going to get, if with a push, I'm going to get a lot of torque or energy still in those knees, so that I can get a nice punch between these two images. And then now, at this point, I don't really need to go back necessarily and look at the video reference, because I do have, you know, I'm not so close in here. I mean, I am so close in here that it would make really no sense to do something that isn't just an in-between between these images. So the breakdowns, you know, can really help, but at a certain point, it's not necessary to do that. So here, if I held that 2 frames and this 2 frames, so this is where I would go and sort of go back to the reference again and say, okay, on frame 13, where is that foot? So this foot is still pretty low. It's going to snap up to frame, you know, 15 and 16 pretty quickly. So I will then be able to say, okay, the body's going to kind of slow into that position, but the foot is going to favor, you know, as the body is slowing into the top position, the foot is slowing out of the bottom position. It's going to favor that, you know, that position on the ground. And with this, I'd probably do another in-between because it is a quick move across the screen and across the other foot. And if I don't, it might be a little confusing in the action. So anytime I am going to cross my feet across each other, I'm probably going to want to do as many drawings as I can to define that action. Now, since I only have one drawing that's not on ones here, I would also probably go back in there and say, okay, let me kind of go in there. I'll continue that slow out of the foot, sort of continue that slow in of the body, going to the up position. And then I'm getting, you know, kind of the movement. And then I can kind of go through and do all the rest of this as well. I'll just keep going here, and let's go from frame 15 to frame 23. Go back, see if there's a breakdown I want to look at. So 15 to 23. So there's actually quite a bit going on here. 18 is at the top position of that foot. So I'm going to go in and go to frame 18, and I'm going to check, okay, so how high is 18 coming down? The other foot is coming down to the ground. So I want to sort of keep track of all of those different things that are happening. Go to frame 18 here and delete that. Let's kind of start with the foot coming down. And then kind of, continuing, this is where, this foot doesn't really have an in-between. It's really the continuation of an action. So I want to check, my arcs and make sure that all of that's feeling right. Then I could go and say, okay, so what's happening? How quickly does it come down? By 22 and 22, 24 or so. Okay, so this again. 19 is down and 21 is kind of down there. So I just sort of get a sense of, kind of where things are happening here. And the energy is pulling. And you can see I'm keeping things really rough because it is not uncommon to have to go back and make adjustments. Okay, let's see what this looks like here. Again, the foot is crossing over in front of another foot. So the more drawings I can do to show that cross, the better. And then let's come back over here. And so up here, this feels like I could probably get away with keeping this on 2s. In every action, so both feet, the hips, they're all doing their own. They're all doing their own slinky pattern, if you will. So the spacing. And I'm trying to keep that all straight in my brain, that there's like 3 slinkies moving together. One's expanding, one's contracting, one's kind of in the middle of the action. And so, I might mess that up here, you can see here I put this in the wrong spot, so I'm going to have to go in and begin to kind of fix that. I'm always wanting to double check. Oops, I got too many. That's, I think, what happened last time. Okay. Okay, and so I'll just keep doing this. I've got a lot left to do. So I'm going to do some of this and kind of skip ahead. All right, so what I'm doing now, I'm just sort of doing a quick fast forward of the work that I did, and as I watching it, and as it's fast forwarding, I can sort of talk a little bit about the different things that I'm always going to be thinking about. I'm always going to be thinking about that up and down position of the hips, trying to get as much sort of a bouncing ball, that sort of upside down bouncing ball, the weight on the bottom, and get that, those arcs, the spacing of those hips, and getting a nice sense of energy in the hips. I'm also going to be thinking, as I've talked about, the spacing of the feet. Now the feet are going to be moving at different speeds. They're going to be making different patterns of image spacing because they'll be moving at different speeds and moving in different arcs, and so each one of those is going to be something I need to sort of track and keep in mind as I'm in betweening all of these things out. Now, the other thing I'm thinking about is making sure I keep my feet planted on the ground. I don't want too much sliding. A little bit of sliding in a dance is okay, but it's actually, I try to make myself be very, very disciplined. You can see when I'm drawing a foot that's on the ground, it is not, unless it's meant to move and slide, I try to keep it as locked in to the position as I can. And sometimes that means when I'm doing a new breakdown, as I'm doing right here, then I'm keeping my foot planted on the ground. I'm not really in-betweening it. I'm not really moving it forward until it's time to do that. So those are some different things you'll want to be thinking about as you're in-betweening these your own dance out. Is, am I keeping my feet locked on the ground? Am I keeping a nice sort of up and down arc in my hips? Am I keeping track of this different spacing and different speeds that my feet are moving? And if you're doing arms and a torso and heads, then those are all moving in their own patterns as well, and you're getting into more complex movements. Because when we move, all the different pieces of our bodies move at different speeds. Okay, so I've gotten through quite a bit here. And I'm going to do this last little piece. You can see how really everything is super rough. If I were going to go back in and clean up and do another, kind of pass here, I would probably go back in and, there's different places I could sort of refine the spacing and refine the movement. And that would work. But you don't need to worry about that for this assignment. For this assignment, if you are doing something that is this loose and this sketchy, that is absolutely great because you can really see the motion. You don't necessarily need to get into tying it down. You can really just kind of concentrate on the movement and the motion. So I'm just going to keep kind of doing what I've started off and kind of talked about, what we kind of quickly jumped ahead through. And I'm just going to keep kind of breaking everything down. Go to 73, 78, check my video reference to see if there's anything I need to be aware of in that time. You know, it seems like it's pretty clear, but I can tell that the weight is coming down on frame 76. So that's probably where I would start. I always try to find something that is going to kind of give me a clue of the extra pieces, the extra energy that's happening. So in this case, that's 76, where I know this foot is now on the ground. That's not necessarily just an in-between that's kind of floating through. I also there needs to be a little bit of bend to that knee because a little bit of weight is sort of coming down. And then I can check and say, okay, well, where is the swinging leg as it's coming through? And it is kind of coming across in front a little bit like this. We can kind of go back in and kind of clean that up just enough to be able to make make the movement clear. And then I've got two in between, so at this point I can sort of say, okay, well, I know what's happening here. Foot is coming down. This becomes a little bit more typical. You know, this foot is swinging across in front, and then I can do another in between. So these become a little bit more typical of an in between, where I'm just putting the pieces in between, like this foot is coming across the front, this body is coming down into this position. I don't necessarily have to figure out an additional sort of breakdown movement when I'm doing this. But then I'll kind of start that over again and say, okay, well, from 78 to 82, let me just look, 78 to 82, there's not much difference here. That's pretty much going to be just an in-between for this. So I can kind of go in the middle. And again, just now do that simple in between. I want to make sure I keep my legs. It's really easy to get the legs and the feet mixed up. Sometimes people will draw the different legs different colors just to keep them straight. And at times I'll do that. I mean, in the last video I drew the sort of the black over the green at a couple of spots. You know, if I'm in betweening down to ones, I'm hopeful that I won't necessarily need that, because there's enough drawings to define the movements. Okay, so 82, 87. I think at this point I'm looking at the weight and saying, okay, when does the weight really sort of lift up? So at 85, this foot starting to come down. This one's still on the ground. So I can kind of go in there and say 85. The body is coming up there. The foot is pretty much in the same place. But there's still some weight. It's happening back here. And then just again go through at this point, probably in betweening. Got, you know, simpler actions. Keeping everything something really loose and sketchy. And then I've got 87 to 91. And I'm going to bring this over here. 7 to 91. So 90 is when that really kind of comes down, but I'm going to give it a couple of extra frames here. Have that foot hit the ground. Now, you know, at the beginning I talked about I was going to keep things on 2s, keep everything very loose and broken down. I ended up, you know, kind of halfway through going back in and just starting to break everything down to 1s. And doing a new drawing on every frame. You know, every shot, every piece of animation is always a little bit different, but with dance or with action, I usually find myself doing this because I can get more drawings to define the action. And that's, you know, sometimes, you know, different animators work different ways, and sometimes that's not necessary. For me, it's just something I've always found that I tend to do. All right. Okay, so pretty much got everything moving here. So, feeling pretty good. You know, I might want to go back in and do some different things and kind of punch through, maybe make this a little bit faster. I can always, you know, delete a drawing and move all of these over if I want to. That's a quick, easy way. It doesn't always work. There, I felt like it works pretty good because I get a little bit more punch in that moment. And I might do the same thing again here, just bringing everything over, and I can just make it a little shorter. So, you know, you can kind of tweak around with it at this point, knowing it's animation. It doesn't have to be the same as the live action reference, but this would be kind of a good, perfectly fine way to turn in your work to evaluate the action, even on a part 2 like this. Now, if you want to go back in and clean things up and make it, you know, tied down and color and all of those things, by all means you can. But understand that when we're animating actions like this, really our primary goal is the movement. So, hopefully that helps. Good luck and have a great week.